is the King of the Jews. That was the charge. Sedition against the emperor. Jesus preached heaven's realm, God's kingdom, over and against Caesar's, and it landed him on a cross. What are we to make of the strange observance of Christ the King Sunday, of Reign of Christ Sunday? This is no Palm Sunday triumphal entry, no Resurrection Day proclamation. This is the last Sunday of the church year, and it's the only Sunday of the church year that we find King Jesus on a cross. It stings a bit of irony, and it's not what we expect today to be about. There's little question that Pope Pius XI was not being ironic. Pius XI was not being ironic when he instituted the Feast of Christ the King back in 1925. As secularist and ultranationalist sympathies raged in Italy, Pius reminded the faithful that it was Christ and not Victor Emmanuel III who was their king. And perhaps that was itself the greatest irony of all. We're still talking about Jesus of Nazareth, the man who walked miles over dusty ground in sandals, who stood shoulder to shoulder with sweaty, dirty crowds, teaching and ministering to their sick, who wrapped a towel around his waist and washed his disciples' feet, who openly socialized with undesirables and shunned the powerful and privileged, who openly challenged ruling elites and imperial priorities. Jesus was nothing like a king. And so what does it mean to call Jesus a king on this Reign of Christ Sunday? For some, particularly for Americans, the idea of calling anyone a king is a bit of a stretch. While we're historically infatuated with the lives of monarchs and their families, we prefer to watch from a distance. We enjoy observing them, but we don't really want one of our own. For others, though, the Apostle Paul's language from the letter to the Colossians, another one of the appointed texts for this morning, will seem fitting for this Christ the King. Paul writes, "He is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation. For in him all things in heaven and on earth were created, things visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or powers. All things have been created through him and for him. He himself is before all things, and in him all things hold together. He is head of the body, the church. He is the beginning, the firstborn from the dead, so that he might come to have first place in everything. For in him all the fullness of God was pleased to dwell, and through him God was pleased to reconcile to God's self all things, whether on earth or in heaven, by making peace through the blood of the cross." That's a lot. So much triumphalism, so much glory. I can scarcely recognize the man. What does it mean for me to call Jesus a king on this Reign of Christ Sunday? Perhaps that's a question I can tackle. For me to call Jesus a king, I have to deconstruct everything that convention tells me about power and authority.